Just as the Ukraine war approaches its third anniversary, a bombshell move from Donald Trump, calling Vladimir Putin to arrange talks and instructing his defense secretary to give a speech that has major implications not just for Ukraine, but also for the whole of NATO. The NATO alliance has guaranteed European security for almost 80 years since 1949. And essential to all that has been America's support. Now, for the first time, that is in some doubt. NATO may have expanded, numbering 32 members now, including Sweden and Finland. But the US is still by far its most important member. America has more than 100,000 military personnel deployed in Europe, has air bases, intelligence bases, and naval assets all stationed here. Donald Trump has been pointing out for years that America spends vast amounts more on defence than any other NATO nation. As you can see here, more than all the other NATO nations put together, with the UK now falling behind Germany into third place. But when viewed as a fraction of GDP defence spending, it looks a bit different. Poland is in the lead, then Estonia, and then America, a flatter line. Now, NATO is thinking of raising its guidelines for defence spending from 2% to 3%. Now, that still leaves it well short of what Russia is spending, almost 7% of its GDP, so Putin can fight his war in Ukraine. US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth says Europe must do more to secure itself, and America has other things to focus on, causing concern about America's commitment to the alliance. But it's what he says about Ukraine that's caused the most alarm in the West, even if Russia is probably delighted.
When he says that if there's a peace deal, there won't be any American involvement in keeping the peace in Ukraine, and it must not be anything to do with NATO, I think that's going to have people in Brussels, somewhat alarmed. Fundamentally, I think this kind of a line will go down extremely well in the Kremlin, because what it says is, right up front, before any negotiation, we're ready to go along with the idea that Russia can help itself to part of next door Ukraine's sovereign territory.
So even before any negotiations start, the Trump administration seems to be ceding ground to Vladimir Putin. After 3 years of war, it says Ukraine must give up the dream of getting all its land back to the borders it had in 2014. Since then, Ukraine has lost around 20% of its territory, Crimea and much of the east. And what Hegseth says about a possible peacekeeping deterrent force along the front line here in blue will also delight Vladimir Putin. Unlike other peacekeeping operations in the past, like this one in Kosovo in the late 90s, this will not be a NATO mission, Hegseth says. It also won't have any American troops in it. And any forces that do take part should not have NATO protection, he says. Now, that will make any government, including Britain's, think long and hard before sending troops to deter Russia from starting the war up again in a few years' time. So the stage is being set. Russia and America are initiating talks about Ukraine. Ukraine was only notified afterwards. The US is giving Vladimir Putin some of what he wants before talks have even begun. Events are moving fast at a pace set by Washington and Moscow, it seems, with allies, including Britain, struggling to keep up.